In Sendai, there is a woman who earns a salary most Western households would consider modest. She does not have a second income. She does not invest in cryptocurrency. She has never read a personal finance book or downloaded a budgeting app. She does not describe herself as particularly disciplined with money because to her, the habits that produce her financial stability are not discipline. They are simply how she relates to money. They have always been how she relates to money. At the end of every month, she has something left. Not a dramatic surplus, enough. Consistently, reliably, without effort, without the internal negotiation that most Western people experience around every small purchase. Enough that over 10 years, without a significant salary increase, without a windfall, without anything the financial industry would recognize as a wealth-building strategy, she has accumulated a meaningful financial cushion that has never once been described to her as impressive, because in Japan, it is not impressive, it is ordinary. Somewhere else, someone earns significantly more than this woman and reaches the end of most months wondering where it went. Not because they are careless, not because they are irresponsible, because 5 specific habits that regulate the relationship between income and expenditure are absent from their daily life, and no salary increase has ever filled the gap that those habits leave, because the gap is not arithmetic, it is behavioral. Japan has a word for the financial practice sitting at the center of this, Kakeibo, a household financial journal, not an app, not a spreadsheet, a physical notebook in which income, expenditure, and savings goals are recorded by hand each month, and 4 questions are asked. How much is coming in? How much is going out? How much is being saved? And how can next month be better? The act of writing by hand slows the financial mind in a way that a digital dashboard never does. Research from Princeton University has shown that handwriting activates areas of the brain associated with deeper cognitive processing than typing, and a financial decision processed deeply is a different decision from one made on autopilot. Habit 5 has nothing to do with spending at all, and it is the one that makes everything else compound. Habit 3 is the one most people have heard a version of and never understood the philosophy beneath. The first habit is Kakeibo, writing it down by hand. Not to track, not to restrict, not to produce a budget to feel guilty about abandoning, to develop awareness. The Japanese financial principle beneath Kakeibo is this: money spent without awareness is money that produces no satisfaction and no memory. The coffee bought in the morning, the online purchase made at midnight, the subscription renewed without thought, none of these are remembered as choices. They are simply places the money went. Writing them down by hand, once a month, at the end of the month, and asking how the money actually felt to spend, whether it was worth what it cost in the terms of genuine value rather than momentary convenience, produces a different quality of financial awareness than any dashboard has ever delivered. Buy a small notebook. At the end of this month, before the new month begins, write down every category of spending and what went into it. Then ask the 4 Kakeibo questions. The answer to the 4th, how can next month be better, rarely involves earning more. It almost always involves spending differently on what is already coming in. The second habit is the purchasing pause. In Japanese consumer culture, there is a deeply embedded concept of the deliberate gap between things. Applied to purchasing, it means introducing a pause between the desire to buy something and the act of buying it. Not an indefinite pause, a specific one. For anything above a certain value, the Japanese habit is to wait a fixed period, a week, 10 days, a month for larger items, before making the purchase. The mechanism behind this is well documented in behavioral economics. A study from Cornell University found that the anticipation of a purchase produces as much dopamine as the purchase itself, and that the satisfaction of the purchase diminishes significantly once it is made. The desire is often not for the object, it is for the feeling of the object arriving. The pause tests this distinction simply and effectively. If the desire remains equally strong after 10 days, the purchase is probably worth making. If it has diminished, as it does in the majority of cases, the pause saved the money and the object would not have produced the satisfaction the desire promised. Implement one rule this week. Anything above a personally chosen threshold waits 10 days before being purchased. Not returned to the basket. Closed. Returned to in 10 days and reconsidered. The surplus that this single habit produces in a month surprises most people who try it. The third habit, the one most people have heard of and never understood the depth beneath: buying less, more carefully chosen. This is often framed as minimalism, an aesthetic preference for fewer possessions, and most people who hear it nod and continue buying at the same frequency. The Japanese version is not an aesthetic, it is Mottainai, the cultural feeling of regret over anything whose full value has not been realized. Applied to purchasing, Mottainai asks not whether the item can be afforded, but whether it will be fully used, fully valued, and worth the regret of spending on it. A cheap item bought impulsively and used twice is not a small financial decision. It is a small financial loss repeated hundreds of times across a year into a significant one. Japanese consumer culture trends toward fewer purchases of higher quality, not because quality is a status signal, but because a well-made thing used fully and cared for produces no mottainai. A cheap thing replaced repeatedly produces it consistently. The financial arithmetic of buying one good version of something rather than 3 poor versions is straightforward. The reason most Western purchasing habits do not follow it is that the impulse to buy is rarely about the object at all. The fourth habit is the separation of spending from emotion. In Japan, the physical separation of money, the use of cash envelopes, the deliberate handling of notes rather than cards, maintains a connection between spending and its cost that contactless payment has almost entirely eliminated from Western daily life. Research from the MIT Sloan School of Management found that people spend up to 100% more when paying by card than by cash for the same items, because the physical absence of the money leaving the hand removes the psychological cost of spending it. The tap of a card and the handing over of notes are not equivalent experiences, and the brain treats them differently in ways that accumulate significantly over a month. The Japanese Kakeibo practice pairs with this. At the start of each month, cash is withdrawn for the spending categories that most commonly produce overspending: dining out, small daily purchases, discretionary items. When the cash is gone, it is gone, not restrictive, honest. The money becomes visible and finite in a way that a bank balance viewed on a screen never quite is. The fifth habit, the one that has nothing to do with spending: knowing what the money is for. In Japanese philosophy, ikigai describes the alignment of daily life with what is genuinely valued, the specific convergence of what brings joy, what the world needs, what one is good at, and what one can be paid for. Applied to personal finance, the concept produces a question most Western financial advice never asks: what is this money actually for? Not in the abstract sense of retirement and security, in the immediate daily sense of what the money spent today is genuinely in service of. The chronic overspending in Western consumer culture is partly a symptom of spending without a clear answer to this question. Money spent on things that do not align with what the person actually values produces neither satisfaction nor savings. It fills a gap that it cannot fill and creates a new one in its place. The Japanese woman in Sendai who reaches the end of every month with something left is not more disciplined than her Western equivalent. She spends on what she values and not significantly on what she does not. The clarity of that alignment is not a financial strategy. It is a byproduct of knowing what the money is for. Write down, before this week is over, 3 things that money spent on consistently and without regret genuinely makes better. Then look at last month's spending and calculate what proportion of it went toward those 3 things and what proportion went toward everything else. The gap between those 2 numbers is where the financial habit change begins. 5 habits: no income increase required, no investment strategy, no financial product. The woman in Sendai has never thought of any of this as financial management. To her, it is simply how a month runs, and at the end of every one, she has enough, which turns out to be the only number that matters. Which of these 5 are you starting with this week? Tell me in the comments. And if someone in your life earns well and cannot understand why the month always runs out before the money should, send this to them today. The answer has never been a higher salary. I will see you in the next one.